Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to learn about Spring Boot framework. Spring Boot is nothing but is an extension of Spring Core framework. So I would say Spring framework on the top of new features, additional features can be called Spring Boot framework. Some people call it as Spring framework plus automatic configuration minus XML configurations. So in the Spring Core, we use XMLs for the bean configurations. We will define the beans in the XML. That we are not going to do with Spring Boot. That's the advantage of Spring Boot. And we have other advantages with the Spring Boot. So there are some few advantages here with the Spring Boot, which are auto configurations, starter dependencies, embedded servers, and CLI, external configuration, actuators, and DevTools. I'm going to explain each of the feature in next slides. The latest version of Spring Boot is 3.3.4. If you access the spring.io, you see the latest releases. Let's look at Spring Boot auto configurations. The auto configuration is a feature. What it does is when you run the Spring Boot application, it will check the components and create object for those components and make it available for the Spring container. That's one thing. Or when you add any jars as a status to the project, then Spring automatically create those objects for the classes and make it available at Spring container. So basically it will find the components and create objects and available at the Spring container. We are not going to create objects manually. Spring only automatically find those components, create objects, and make it ready for us. Automatically does everything. That's called auto configurations. So in the Spring, we will define a class as component by using @component annotation. @bean also we can use with the configuration annotation. I'm going to explain more about these stereotype annotations in the future. If you look at here in the diagram, the jars added to the project, Spring Boot is going to find those jars, find all the dependent jars and create objects and make it available for us ready-made. Or in the project, when you define any class as component, Spring Boot automatically find those classes and create objects and make it available for us. That's the use of auto configuration. Let's look at Spring Boot starters. Starters are nothing but it's a collection of jars bundled together. If you want to develop an application for the web, maybe you can use Spring Boot Web. If you want to develop an application and want to use database related stuff, maybe you can use Spring Boot Starter JPA. If you want to add security stuff to your project, you can use Spring Boot Starter Web. So all the starters are listed here in this URL. You can go and access. Basically, when you creating a project, so by writing a single line or giving a single line, you get all the jars related to that kind of module. Suppose I want to develop a web-based application by using Spring Boot. If I use Spring Boot Starter Web, I'm going to get all the web related jars, JSP jars, container jars, other jars, everything. If I want to add database related stuff, I can use data JPA. It will give you all the jars related for database connection pool, transaction management, everything. If I want to have mailing feature, maybe I can use starter-mail starter. if I add the starter, related jars, required jars for the mailing will be automatically added to the project. No need to explicitly add, configure, compile. No, Spring Boot automatically does everything. That is a great thing about starters. So if you add a starter, actual jars, dependence jars, related jars, everything will be added automatically. Spring will take care of it. That's a great thing about Spring Boot starters. In the Spring Boot framework, we have one of the feature is embedded servers. When you create a Spring Boot application, by default, it will add the server configurations and servers will be available. So we can just think about the business logic, and when you run the application, by default, the existing server automatically execute the application. Maybe you can change the existing servers in the configuration that I'm going to explain in the future. So in one shot, I would say by default, an embedded server will be available when you create a Spring Boot application. No need to worry about configuring the server additionally. Now look at one of the feature, Actuator. So basically we use this feature Actuator to see the CPU usage, other capabilities of the applications. So we can check the health of this application, metrics of usage, environment, or any uses, the scalability and everything. Basically it's like we can check the health of the project by using Actuator. I'm going to create much more detailed video about these features future. Let's look at CLI, command line interface. In the Spring Boot, we have CLI feature is available. So with the CLI, usually we develop applications, write the code in the Eclipse IDE or on another IDEs. Same time compiling and execution and everything we do it in the IDE. Creating a project also we do in the IDE. By using CLI, when the Spring CLI has been installed, you can manage the project from command line also or terminal also. If you look at this command Spring help run, basically you need to install the Spring CLI, and if you run Spring help run, it will give you all the options for you to execute those operations from command line. You can create a Spring Boot application, or we have a lot of options from command line interfaces. Now look at Spring Boot DevTools. So DevTools is nothing but basically we use these tools to restart the application whenever there is a change or any changes in the configuration. Rather restart multiple times. Maybe by using this feature we can reload the changes automatically whenever there is a change. If the application server port is changed, it will automatically reload. If I change any property value, it will automatically reload. So rather manually restart each time, by using DevTools we can automatically reload the changes. Dynamic.